Well, good morning, fellow Toastmasters. You are in for a treat because we are about to have a wonderful discussion around diversity, inclusion, and belonging in Toastmasters. And I'd like you all to give a warm Toastmasters welcome to our Area 33 Director and our moderator, Miss Miho Tanaka. Take it away, Miho.
Thank you so much, Rick, for the nice introduction. Good morning, everybody. I'm Miho Tanaka. I am a member of the PMRWDC. Number one, I have been with Toastmaster since 2007, and I'm serving as Area 33 Director at this moment. I have honored to moderate today's session. I just want to give you some background of why we are having this conversation this morning. As you have heard, diversity, inclusion, and equity or belonging quite often in media, news, and maybe some of your organization, company, and university, and a nonprofit organization talk about this concept quite often. It seems that the concept is not clearly defined. Each organization defined it differently to some extent. And as a Toastmaster Club, we would like to attempt to explore what it means to Toastmaster clubs, and what it means to us. So that is the motivation of organizing this session. And I do hope that you find today's session is very informative, educational, empowering, and inspirational. And I hope each of you will get at least one take-home message, something you can implement at the personal level or club level, district level in your Toastmaster journey or Toastmaster world. And I would like to, before I introduce each of the panel, I would like to have some housekeeping messages. First one, I'm so glad that each of you get joined to this session. Probably the title, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, sort of was intriguing, and I really appreciate your participation. And I just want to mention that through this session, we don't mean to endorse any political view. We are not talking about this important concept, any political prism. We just want to have some conversation about diversity, inclusion, and belonging in the Toastmaster world. So we're not endorsing any one political party either. We just wanted to make sure that you understand that before we started having very exciting conversation this morning. And the second, I am so glad that many of you already turned on the video, since we would like to encourage participant engagement, Toastmaster engagement. If you don't mind, please turn on your video so that we can see you, how you're responding to the panelists' comments and sharing all the stories. So please do that. Second, as you know, during the panel discussion, although we want to see you on the video, but please mute yourself so that we can listen each panelist sort of responses and stories, exciting story. I think you're all doing pretty good. So let's get started. And I also want to, today we are going to have three exciting panelists, and I would like to give us some short bio of who they are, what their background, what their sort of perspective about diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And I also want to mention that Distinguished Toastmaster Rick Taylor and Distinguished Toastmaster Edmund Joe, who has been supporting make this session happen. And also they are serving as Zoom co-host as well. So I really appreciate their support and encouragement to make this session happen. With that, I would like to introduce esteemed three panelists, and just going by alphabetical order of the last name to introduce them. The first panelist is Leilani, Toastmaster Leilani DeWitt, and the second, yes, So I have her bio. Leilani has been a Toastmaster since 2014. She is a member of both Centerville Toastmaster Club and the Leaders Circle. She is currently serving as Division F Director for the district. She always had a passion to understand that not only the differences in how people think, but also the value of building teams comprised of who think differently. For example, creating team by determinedly comprising people who think in the pattern of and metaphors, inductive logic, with people who think in a more structured manner, deductive logic, with over a decade experience professionally building engineering and data science teams, determined and comprised of people with neurodiversity. She is always fascinated by the strengths of the most diverse thinking team. Welcome, Toastmaster Leilani. Second panelist, I would like to introduce a Toastmaster, Gary Holland. Gary Holland has been married for 27 years, and his wife and he raised 5 wonderful children in Stafford, Virginia. Professionally, Gary is a senior director at the BMC Software, where he leads a global team of architects and engineers. Additionally, he served as pastor at Word of Faith Church in Dumfries, Virginia, on the Unity Way Diversity and Inclusion Task Force. He is a founder of Enough, which is a volunteer organization focused on border literacy, civic engagement, community service, youth development, economic development, empowerment, and criminal justice throughout Virginia. Recently, his activities expanded to St. Louis, Missouri. In 2010, Gary focused S3 Toastmasters, where he recently served as a club president, to help people from diverse backgrounds develop as leaders and speakers. Welcome, Toastmaster Gary Holland. Third speaker I would like to introduce is my colleague from my home club, PMWDC #1. Neda Saadati is a certified public accountant working for the federal government as an auditor. She lives in DC area for the past 18 years, though she was born in the West Coast, raised in Iran. Her diverse background shapes her belief that strength lies in differences, but not in similarities. In her roles as a BPM, she has embraced the value of diversity in attracting new members in order to expand the club's social development. She finds it inspirational to learn about different backgrounds, culture, and beliefs that diversity brings unique perspective to our society. Thank you so much for the panelists who are joining us today. You have some very interesting background, and I'm quite sure you have a lot of interesting stories to tell to us. So I would like to kick off some questions which we prepared ahead of today's panel discussion. And I would like to ask each panelist to respond to those questions. You can dissect and you can cook any way you want to respond to those questions. And you have up to 5 minutes to respond. So each panelist has about 5 minutes to respond to a question. Hopefully what they're telling you is very inspirational and thought-provoking. And after that section, I would like to invite audience to ask some questions. And actually during panelists are sharing some stories and their perspective, you're welcome to submit your question to the chat box. And we would like to say, Rick and Edmond are looking at the chat box, and Rick is going to moderate the question from the audience. So that's going to happen after each person and each panelist share their perspective, the story. And when you submit the question in the chat box, if possible, please direct each question to particular panelists, if that's appropriate, so that we can have very engaging conversation, very meaningful conversation, and panelists can respond to your questions very effectively. So with that, I would like to show 3 questions on the screen. Are you able to see those questions? Thank you.
Okay.
So I just want to quickly read it. The questions are, what diversity, inclusion, and belonging mean to you? Do you think diversity, inclusion, and belonging are important in the context of a Toastmaster Club? Why? What steps can Toastmasters take to create, promote cultural diversity, inclusion, and belonging? What step can be taken at individual level, organizational level, how you can incorporate some of the tips and strategy to conduct a Toastmaster meeting? Thank you. So I would like to invite the first panelist, Toastmaster Leilani DeWitt. So how would you like to define by diversity, inclusion, and belonging? And please take away and respond to those questions.
Thank you so much, Miho. Welcome, fellow Toastmasters. I love this topic. I think it's fascinating. To me, the diversity of people comes from our brains, because who are we? We're not just arms and legs and bones. It's our brains. It's our brains that define who we are. So when I hear the word diversity, I'm thinking the diversity of our brains. And if you think about it, the brain is the only organ in our bodies that changes based upon experiences. Your bones don't change, your muscles don't change, your heart, your liver, they all stay the same based on your experiences, but your brain will change and adapt. So who we are is a sum of our experiences that change our brain, as well as the biology behind our brain. So from the biological perspective, our brains tend to be different, and their scientists can study these differences. And one example comes from a book that I read called Quiet: The Power of Introverts Living in a World That Can't Stop Talking. Has anybody read that book or heard of it? About introverts and extroverts? I thought that book was fascinating. And I went on to do a little bit more research as to what is the biological, why are we an introvert or an extrovert? And it turns out to be very biological. There are little parts of our DNA that affect whether we'll be an introvert or an extrovert. And one of those little parts of the DNA is called the G allele. And the G allele defines how your brain works in social situations. If you have a dominant G allele, you are very sensitive to social situations. And scientists have studied populations across the world. Can anybody guess what country has the highest predominance of the G allele, DNA, that makes people very sensitive to social situations? Can anybody guess? Go ahead and speak it out. What country would that be? It's
China.
China is in there. Thailand is very high in it, but the number 1 is Japan. So fascinating. This is our DNA that's defining part of a culture, and what cultures have the lowest level of DNA that have the G allele. You want to guess?
Is it the United States?
Yeah, United States and Europe. So it's biological, you know, how we are. And if they study introverts and extroverts, the United States has the highest predominance of extroverts in the world, and China is nearly 100% introverts. That's biological. Now, from the experience side, the experiences that we have also changes our brain. And the biggest example of that is PTSD. Like if you're in a terrible car crash and you can't get over it, if they do an MRI of your brain has actually changed based upon that experience. And so we've all had experience, whether you got picked on as a kid, and how these things affect you will actually change your brain. None of us are the same people as who we were 10 years ago. So our brain is experiences, our brain is biology, and that's what I find fascinating about coming to Toastmasters, because, and I don't have any scientific studies on this, but if you go to a Toastmasters meeting, who's attracted to Toastmasters? In my opinion, is all of these introverts, right? Who are really worried about, speaking up and saying the wrong thing. So Toastmasters attracts those introverts who really want to gain the skills to speak, but it also attracts those extreme extroverts who just live to have people who will listen to them and talk to other people and have those other dynamics. So the introverts are learning to speak, the extroverts are learning to listen. I find that fascinating. And I think the introduction to this topic also mentioned that we have a lot of international speakers. There are a lot of studies that show when you have international speakers speaking to one another, a conversation that's all non-native speakers will go very well and they'll communicate really well. But if you add one native speaker, the conversation stops. And the reason why is we as native speakers use all of these idioms, then we forget that we're using them. Like we'll say, I'm all ears. Well, to a non-native speaker, what does that mean? Or wet behind the ears. So in Toastmasters, we learn if you're talking native speakers, non-native speakers, you really need to slow down and get rid of those idioms. The introverts and the extroverts, that dynamic is fantastic. So I love Toastmasters because the diversity of the neurodiversity that I find within our meetings. And that's what I find very cool about Toastmasters. Thank you, Miho, for this opportunity.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes, sorry. I see the screen, but I'm not seeing my Zoom button, so it's a little bit difficult to know whether I'm muted or not, but I didn't think I was muted. Thank you so much, Leilani. It's such interesting. I did not know that I have a lot of, it's a geoleo. I even don't know how to spell that word. So I'm learning something new from her talk as well. And so do the audience who's participating in today's panel discussion as well. With that, I would like to introduce the second panelist, Gary Holland. Gary, could you respond to those questions? And I'm quite sure that you have a very interesting story to tell. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Miho. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Excited to be here. And thank you so much, Leilani, for what you shared. I didn't know that I was going to be in a science class this morning. Listen, looking at the questions generates all sorts of thoughts, all sorts of comments. And I know I only have 5 minutes, so I won't go down every road that's spiraling through my mind right now. But the very first question, I think, is the most important one. And what does diversity, inclusion, and belonging mean to me? And when I think of those 3 words, and I expand it to the context of everyone on this call, inclusion and belonging mean the same to all of us. We all are included. We all belong to our own ethnic groups, our own cultural groups, our own socioeconomic teams, our own communities. So we know what it means to belong. We know what it means to be included. We know what it means to feel a part of something bigger than ourselves. The challenge is when you sprinkle diversity into that. That's when we have a problem, or we have challenges making sure that people that aren't like us, people that don't think like us, look like us, worship like us, work like us, right? Making sure that they feel included, make sure that they feel like they belong to something larger than themselves. And that diversity is really the challenge, because essentially we all know what it means to be part of something larger than ourselves. But when we look outside of what we're comfortable with, and we begin to think as leaders and communicators, right? How do we make others that aren't like us feel a part of that thing that we are excited about? that's where the work steps in. But I learned something in a Dale Carnegie course many, many years ago when I first began to lead in the software industry. All of us have something in common. And when we're attempting to find out how we can make others feel like they belong or others feel included, or when we're attempting individually to connect with other people, the key is finding out what is it that we have in common with that person. And Dale Carnegie taught us a technique that I won't go through all the details, but it was a visualization technique that we could use to guide conversations with people that we meet for the very first time until ultimately we find that thing that we have in common. Maybe it's a book, maybe it's a sport, maybe it's somewhere we've traveled, maybe it's where we're from, maybe it's the construct of our families, or some other unique, interesting topic that we have in common. And when we find that commonality, we can build upon that to make sure that people feel a part of the organization, a part of the team, a part of the community. So diversity, inclusion, and belonging are vital, but we have to do work to make sure that we bring others into that team, that community, that organization. It's vital for Toastmasters, in my opinion. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense if we have a Toastmasters club and every member of the club is exactly the same. Every member has the same educational structure. Every member looks the same, speaks the same, eats the same foods. It's difficult to learn from each other if we all have the same experiences. It's difficult to learn how to monitor that you're saying in your speeches, the idioms, as Leilani mentioned, right? It's tough when everybody's the same. Having diverse Toastmasters clubs, absolutely, in my opinion, helps us to become more better speakers, better leaders. Our Toastmasters effort is becoming better together. And if that is made up of the same people, I don't think we can become as we like to be. So within Toastmasters, it's essential, I believe, to have different diverse experiences.
I don't know if it's among my internet connection, but I think
Cultures,
okay.
How can we do that in my opinion? And we made sure that the leadership mirrored. So it's important that the president, VPE, etc., are diverse so that the members see the diversity that we're promoting and that we're looking for, and so that we can truly grow together, learn together, and become better together. And that should be mirrored throughout the various levels of our club. So that's what diversity, inclusion, and belonging means to me. Hopefully, I said something that stirred some thinking for those that are attending. Thank you very much. Back over to you, Miho.
Thank you so much. Gary, thank you so much for sharing very interesting perspective. And yes, we're talking about diversity, but I did not think about the common. What is something we share as a common? That's very interesting and exciting angle. We also just need to think about. I'm sorry, there was a little bit internet issue. So maybe my internet was a little bit slow. So I was not able to hear some parts of the your talk, but I think it was very exciting to hear. Maybe we have some question to ask you to elaborate some points which we missed. So I would like to invite my friend and a colleague from TWDC #1, Neda, Toastmaster Neda Saadati. Neda, can you respond to those questions and share your perspective about diversity, inclusion, and belonging? Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Miho. Welcome, Toastmasters and distinguished guests. Thank you so much, Gary and Leilani, for your comprehensive explanations. I believe strength lies in our differences, not in our similarities. To me, diversity means being able to learn from different people from different backgrounds, different perspectives, and different experiences. Those are what make us unique. I believe diversity is a state of mind, is the cultural intelligence that make us able to understand our differences and value our differences. Inclusion and belonging is being able to create an environment of belonging for people to feel welcomed, supported, and valued. With the Toastmasters experience, we get paired with so many great minds. Toastmasters also give us the unique and great opportunity to share our backgrounds. A lot of us joined the Toastmasters Club to become better communicators. We also joined to become more effective leaders. Now, 90% of leading executives from 68 different countries have identified cross-cultural leadership as the top management challenge in the next century. So I believe it is important to be a diverse and more inclusive Toastmasters Club. And Toastmasters is a diverse organization. We are in 149 countries already. We have more than 15,000 clubs and more than 300,000 members. As a diverse organization, I believe that we need to be empowering and supportive to our members and to everyone to feel comfortable participate. I believe that we need to be able to create a culture of inclusion and belonging at the Toastmasters so that members feel comfortable participating. One way to do that is through mentorship. I think mentorship is a great tool that we can utilize to help members feel seen for their unique contribution, and so make them feel connected to other members and also make them feel supported. And this is when they contribute their best work. I think another way to promote the culture of diversity and inclusion is by providing the meeting agenda ahead of time. And this is what we practice at our club. By providing the meeting agenda ahead of time, it gives the members a chance to reflect on the topic and also to prepare their contribution to that meeting. So therefore, I believe these are great tools that we can utilize to hear all voices. Thank you so much, Miho.
Thank you so much for each of the panelists. I just stop sharing. So I did hear a very interesting concepts, and I think each of the panelists had a different way to address what is it, diversity and inclusion and belonging mean to the Toastmaster Club. I did learn some science of neurodiversity. That's a new concept, and it's good to talk about diversity, inclusion, belonging, the perspective. What do we have in common? And that's very, very intriguing. Thank you so much, Gary. And Neda, you also shared some tips how we can encourage promoting diversity, inclusion and belonging at the Toastmaster meeting and level. And I would like to move to the next section, and probably all the audience that you heard very interesting perspective from different panelists. And are there any questions we can ask to the panelists from the audience?
No questions yet, Miho, but please do. If you have a question, type it in the chat, and we will make sure that our panelists have an opportunity to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, I would like to encourage all the audience to think about your question. And at the end of today's session, each of you are encouraged to get some take-home message. So there is just one question just came out from Neda.
Yeah. Yes, Sharon would like to hear more from Neda about the agenda being provided early.
Neda, would you like to respond to that question?
Sure. Thank you so much, Sharon. Great question. Yeah, so at the PMI WDC #1, we provide the meeting agenda and our theme of each meeting ahead of time, usually a week or so in advance, I believe, Miho. Correct me if I'm wrong. And in that agenda, we provide the theme, the word of the day, and the topic of the discussion, and also different roles that everyone is taking. And also each section is mentioned so that people can select a role to participate. And I'm not sure about other clubs and how they do it, but this is a format that we follow at PMI WDC, and it's very helpful.
Thank you. I also want to chime in a little bit in PMWD where I'm from and Neda is from. The club might maybe try to be purposely choose like a word of the day, the theme of the day, try to accommodate the concept of diversity. For example, we try to have theme of the day. I forgot the exact phrase, but we try to encourage everybody to talk about their cultural tradition. We might do it during the holiday season. And some of the table topic questions are really encourage the people to talk about their diverse background as well. Those are sort of the tips we implemented at PMWDC as well.
Miho, we have a few additional questions in the chat.
Great.
Beverly Ross wants to know, how do you address differences that may make others feel uncomfortable?
Beverly, are you directing that question to particular panelists, or do you have any suggestion, or do you want any panelists to respond to that question? But could you sort of elaborate what you mean by make you feel uncomfortable? What does it mean?
Beverly, would you like to unmute yourself and elaborate a little bit?
Sure. Example, you may have an introvert who doesn't want to participate just because there's a lot of extroverts that, you know, they can handle differences, they can handle whatever, they're having a great time, but introverts have a tendency to not want to participate or pull back. And therefore, how do you still make them feel included if they're so uncomfortable? In introverts, as you know, she demonstrated, can be cultural, but it doesn't have to be cultural. Introverts can be all different types of people, but that seems to be always a challenge.
Thank you for adding
I can take
additional
that one.
information. Okay.
So this is a superb question. So how do you in a group get input from everyone? And one example is this brainstorming session that we're all used to do, where everybody gets in a room and gets the Post-its and puts all of the words up, you know, and all of the ideas across the room. So studies have shown that the introverts will not participate in that, because they don't, you know, they don't want to be embarrassed or say something silly, whereas the extroverts will really love that. So you do have to change your process and procedure. So the new way of doing brainstorming is you're supposed to take some time first and let everybody come up with their ideas. And that gets those introverts going. They'll write down their 20 ideas and then do that. You know, everybody in the room put the Post-its up. So you can have those extroverts that will put their 20 Post-its up plus another 40, but you get the first 20 from the introverts. So that's one way to do it. And another way to do it is just education. I have a friend, and he actually believes in reincarnation. And he actually believes that he will only be reincarnated if he has lived a perfect life. So he cannot tell a falsehood, and he cannot make a statement without making sure he said everything, because he's worried about a lie of omission. And so once I understood that, I have to always let him know, I understood what you said, go on to the next topic, because he will just dig and dig and dig and dig on one point, because he doesn't want to admit anything. So in talking to him, I always have to let him know, because I understand where he's at now, I have to change my communication style. So I think the answer to this question is you have to adapt your process, and you also have to make sure that you understand the reason behind somebody not participating.
Thank you, Leilani. We can move to the next question. I'm glad that there were people asking questions, but wonderful.
I think Gary had his hand raised and he wanted to make a point. Gary?
Thank you, Rick. I do apologize for my connection. I'm in the basement. I just returned from a week business trip in New Orleans, and guess what I tested positive for this morning? So I've been relegated to the basement. So my internet connection isn't at the strongest point in the basement. So I apologize for that. But to speak to that question, there are lots of things that we have differences about today in this society, and it does make it a challenge within Toastmasters and other environments for people to speak with each other, work together, etc., because they differ on political ideologies or what have you. What I found to help is to facilitate breakout sessions, facilitate small discussions where people that have differing opinions have an opportunity to discuss them in a safe environment where there's no judgment, where they're able to share their thoughts and realize they're being listened to. And the only expectation is that they listen to the other side as well. As we talk to each other, differences, we agree to disagree, as we're put in positions to communicate with each other and listen to each other.
Gary, I'm sorry, your internet connection is not stable, so you're breaking up. I don't know if you can even hear me.
Another group throughout the community.
So I'm going to suggest that we move to the next question, which was originally directed towards Gary, but seeing as how Gary is having some internet connectivity issues, perhaps we can invite other members of our panel to take a stab at this. The question is, seeing how Toastmasters is so diverse, what can be done by members to spread the concept of diversity, unity, and cooperation throughout their communities?
Hello, I've returned. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Did you hear that question, Gary?
I did. I saw it in the comments. I think that key to making sure that from a Toastmasters perspective, that we spread the concept of diversity, unity, etc. in our communities is that we get outside of our weekly, bi-monthly meetings, and as groups, as clubs, we involve ourselves in the community. There are all sorts of things going on across all of our communities where we can come together to show a diverse team of people feeding the homeless or helping with youth development or helping in certain other areas that aren't political, that aren't divisive, but that show a group of different people, men, women, different faiths, etc. But the thing that unites us is Toastmasters. If we come together and get outside of our meetings, we can then begin to show the community that Toastmasters really does care and are interested in reaching people and helping people to become better leaders and communicators. So the key is getting outside, in my mind, of the meetings and showing ourselves active in the communities.
We also have another question here. Diversity not only includes culture, but also includes age. How do you deal with the age differences? The most common issue is the technical knowledge on the computer. This was a question from Nelson Latona.
Well, I guess I could take that. I'm one of the oldest ones here. And I actually have a question back to the audience, because age means we are from different cultures and different times. And what might have been okay in the 1950s is not okay in the 2020s. And that's hard. And so I actually have a question back to the audience. At the last set of contests, we had a couple of people who gave speeches, which I think was the 1950s culture about one night stands after they're going to the bars, and they thought that was funny, which in the 2020s is not funny. So, okay, question back to this audience, what do you think we should do as a Toastmasters organization when someone is across the generations thinking something is funny from the 1950s, and here we are in the 2020s? I thought that was a really tough challenge. I'd like to open that question up to everybody.
Well, one thought.
Before,
Go ahead, Gary.
yeah, as people are thinking of their response, I also believe, and this is a question that applies to churches and synagogues and mosques, etc., because there are younger people that want to learn those things. I think the key is making sure that we are very focused on including younger people in our leadership, including younger people in our strategic discussions about how we're going to form our clubs, reach out to new members, structure our meetings, that we solicit their input so that we're doing things that are exciting and engaging and interesting to them. Maybe it involves a separate set of meetings or a separate type of regular meeting specifically for them. So I do think we need to engage them in the leadership so that we can have their input and their guidance as we go forward, whether it's Toastmasters or a mosque or a synagogue or a church or what have you. We can't always tell them what we think is best because younger people do have their own opinions.
Thank you, Rick. I just want to be a little bit more cognizant of the time. I know I really like that everybody actively asking a question. And we wish we have more time. We have a little bit, 9 more minutes to go. So shall we take one more question and move to the next section? Oh, I see the 2 hands raised.
Yeah. AJ, would you like to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Toastmasters. No, I was responding to Leilani because she did open up the question to the audience, I believe. And I understand that generational divide where we will have older members and then we have the younger members. And we have that in our families where we have our great grandparents and great aunts and uncles. And then we have this younger generation who live their entire lives on social media. And it is just I have it, it's where we stand in our listening. We listen with compassion, we listen with understanding, and then we also communicate as well from that same space, being mindful of being condemning or putting people into a box as far as how we should and shouldn't think or speak. Yes, there is things that would society, we would say is inappropriate. That was something in the 50s where we would turn a blind eye, was okay to say certain things that wouldn't land now in the 2020s. I can't believe we're in 2022 now, as appropriate. However, we get to stand in, okay, let's just have a conversation about that. Why would that be something we wouldn't necessarily say is okay now, without throwing people off to the pasture and saying, okay, no, that's just wrong. So it is about all inclusivity. That's where that inclusivity comes in, where we can just listen and be compassionate in how we speak and how we listen to everyone in Toastmasters, in our families, and in the community.
Thank you.
Soraya, you also have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you. I would like to present that for Toastmasters, it's particularly the home club, excuse me, that I'm in now. We, a lot of times, are coming to clubs to have familiarity, to develop our comfort zones outside of the hectic world we have at work. So in that itself, it breeds some separatism sometimes. And how do we as clubs provide that comfort zone without the push and pull, because to be all inclusive is work. And that's my question.
I just want to commend you. I completely agree. We do want to make our clubs a comfortable place to be, but then you can also create your own club culture that might not fit into the larger culture. Maybe just be cognizant. I think that's an excellent point.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that each of the audience participants raising a lot of important questions. My big take home message from today's panel discussion is we need more time. This is a very important topic for the Toastmaster Club Division 29. And maybe for the next TLI, we will have a follow-up session if everybody agrees. Everybody, maybe we can have another moderator who can take on. And this is a certainly very important topic. And each person have very unique question. And we don't have a clear answer, but we can continue to explore to find out what the diversity, inclusion, and belonging means. So since we have only 4 more minutes left, I wanted to ask each panelist what they recommend as one big key take-home message. At the beginning of our session, I encouraged each participant to think about what is your take-home message from out of this session. So I would like to ask each panelist what is that key take-home message they are recommended. I would like to invite Neda to start with. Neda, what would be the key take-home message you are recommending to the audience?
Thanks, Miho. And thank you for the great discussion. I really enjoyed this session. I hope the audience did as well. I believe one takeaway could be understanding what diversity, inclusion, and belonging mean to everyone, and in the context of Toastmasters, and how we can expand our exposure to different backgrounds, perspective, and experiences at the Toastmasters Club or at our professional life. And the fact that understanding the importance of the diversity and how it would increase productivity at work, or the trust between the members and members' engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to invite Gary to share his take-home message recommendation. What would it be?
Sure. My recommendation, we all have
Gary, I'm sorry that we can't hear you well. I may have to ask you to type it in the chat box.
I'll type.
Is that okay to type? Thank you. And maybe we can move to Leilani, since we have a few minutes left.
Well, thank you, Miho. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, members, for all speaking up. I thought this was a wonderful panel. We talked about a lot of different aspects of diversity, the biology of our brains, the experiences that we've had, the different cultures that we have, the different perspectives that we have, cross-generational. And I know we all like to talk about diversity and inclusion, you know, as this rainbow unicorn, great things, but it's harder than it looks. And I was really happy that this panel and the discussions brought that up. The power, the wisdom of the crowd, the ability to leverage the diversity of experiences and cultures and how we all see things makes us all better. And yet we do have to work at it. It's not easy, but it's worth it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Leilani. And so Gary typed up his take-home message. My take-home is a self-assessment. We all have biases. The implicit ones are the bonds that hinder us from connecting with others. That's a great statement. As we understand our biases, we can work to address them and connect with others. That is his recommended take-home message. I see Soraya is raising a hand. Do you have anything to chime in? We have 1 more minute.
I apologize. I need to take my hand down. That was from previous. Thank you for recognizing.
Oh, thank you. I wanted to engage you too. Thank you so much for your participation. So my take-home message, I have many. So since we have it's already 11:20, so I don't want to spend too much time. I really enjoyed learning different perspective. And my bottom line is probably as a Toastmaster Club, we want to be sort of safe, psychologically safe environment. How to create that? That's something club leadership can think about. And the diversity of clubs leaders are probably very important because people are looking at the leaders. And that's something we can think about. And also at club members level, understanding other people's perspective. Curiosity might be issue. Why this person is saying this? What is the driver? Why? What is their belief? And so being curious might be something we all can think about as a Toastmaster as well as a human being as well. And there are some how to arrange a table topics question. That might be a way to go. And then set the theme of the day for your club meeting as well. So those are just selected key take-home message I had today. Since we are already 11:21, as a Toastmaster, I want to be cognizant of our time management. And I would like to conclude our session. And I really want to appreciate the 3 great panelists, as well as all the audience participants, and also Rick and Edmund who supported today's session. Thank you so much, everybody. And I really enjoyed your wisdom and engagement. And with this, I would like to conclude this session with warm round of applause to everybody who participate today. Thank you so much.
And I would like to invite everyone to unmute themselves to give Miho and our distinguished panelists a warm round of applause. Great job, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hope that the rest of the day at the TLI is going to go well, and I look forward to seeing you, many of you, in a future meeting. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.